to our next speaker. And our next speaker is Abhishek Tamalabad. And Abhishek co-founded the Marine Life of Mumbai initiative in 2017 as an open, citizen-driven collective to document coastal biodiversity in Mumbai. The main aim of this organization has been to fill data gaps that hinder conservation and management of the intertidal ecosystem in Mumbai, and they also conduct outreach that directly aids this. And Abhishek's talk is going to be on charting biodiversity and transforming the urban seascape, a citizen-driven approach. So Abhishek, looking forward.
Good day, everyone. I'm Abhishek, and my talk for today is going to take us to the seascape of urban Mumbai. What do you think of when you think of Mumbai and the sea? Probably a little bit of fun, a little bit of relaxation, some fishing in the shallow waters, or high rises with a sea view. You might also think of big infrastructure projects which have now become synonymous with Mumbai, such as the iconic sea link that you see on the right hand side. But this seascape is also home to lesser known sites, such as this colony of zoanthus polyps, which is right at the edge of the city. Up close, they look like this. Or a colony of hard corals, even. Or even entire landscapes like this, which are revealed at low tide in the intertidal zone, which is between the high and low tide mark. This brings me to the title of our talk for today, which is Charting Biodiversity in a Transforming Urban Seascape, and how our team tried to do it with a citizen-driven approach, which is still ongoing. Intertidal biodiversity documentation has been rather slow in India for a variety of reasons. Firstly, many of these are lesser known taxa. They're not extensively studied in India by scientists. As a consequence of that, identification resources available are ambiguous. The taxonomy is debated. The intertidal is a vast area. It sounds like it's a narrow strip of land, but it's actually large swathes of land that get exposed at low tide. And there are several sites. Just within Mumbai, we have multiple sites which are too many to cover just for experts to explore on their own. The observation time is very limited because it's limited to tide windows. Good low tides are very few and far apart in the year. And lastly, there has always been a dearth of serious enthusiasts to document it, and a lack of general public participation as opposed to an activity such as birding in India. We try to address some of these issues at a very basic level with the Marine Life of Mumbai initiative, which we started in February of 2017, where a small group of us started exploring the seashores on our own and inviting members of the public to join us in this exploration. Just that was not enough because most people are completely unaware of what lies in the intertidal, and even we were when we started out. So we started leveraging social media to address that, where we posted about species that we were finding in the intertidal of Mumbai to get people familiar with it and to get them to join us. Some members of our team who were more experienced with social media even created interactive, engaging content on social media to get people hooked. We started a website which also featured guidelines such as these to enable people to explore on their own or to prepare them for when they would join us to explore. Some of the artists in our team came up with these illustrated shore guides for each of the shores in Mumbai, where we introduced people to the more common species on these shores. And all of this was available for free download from our website. At the start, we started seeing a few interesting species, but that soon added up in time to more and more species. And we found that many of them were missing from journals or other documentation. And that's when we thought we needed to take this documentation to a more systematic format now. And we started using iNaturalist, again, for a variety of reasons. Firstly, iNat has a simple user interface, as most of you would know. It's easy to use for observers, identifiers, and just people who want to browse the database. The identification system on iNat, which features a lot of discussing and a lot of back and forth with IDs, is ideal for frequently misidentified taxa or taxa that haven't been studied a lot, which is very common in the intertidal. It is very easy to set up projects based on the criteria one needs. An example is our project. And lastly, iNat takes a great deal of effort to make itself fun to use for casual first timers who are not so familiar with documenting nature. To tell you more about our iNaturalist project, I will hand over to my colleague Shaunak Modi.
Thank you, Abhishek. Hello, everyone. We chose iNaturalist as a central pillar for our citizen science programs for a variety of reasons, as Abhishek mentioned earlier. I will take you all through our projects on iNaturalist, briefly talk about our work in and beyond Mumbai, and our plans for the future. The Marine Life of Mumbai project on iNaturalist has been growing steadily. Started in March 2018, the project today has nearly 3,000 observations of 396 taxa, which will only increase as more observations are identified to the species level. The number of people actively contributing to the project have steadily increased as well. What started with just the team has 91 members today. Our documentation for MLOM has largely been from these 13 sites around the city. We continue to monitor these sites regularly, and our aim is to increase the documentation from those shores that have so far been less frequently visited. Among the many species that we found were lost species, those that had been documented from the city but had been missing for decades. Among them is the Goniobranchus bombayanus, a sea slug described from Mumbai in 1946 and named after the city. This sea slug hadn't been reported from the city's shores since its description until October 2018 when we found it on a shore walk at Haji Ali. We have also come across a lot of protected species. What you see here are 4 types of hard corals, and although these were documented from Mumbai before, we found that they were far more widespread than they were thought to be. And since they're protected by law, their documentation will have a bearing on land use in the intertidal as well. So what is our data used for? It is essentially open-ended for use, as is the case with a number of citizen science projects. It continues to serve as a simple reference guide for both us and others as it keeps building over time. It has been used as an information resource for third-party education and outreach as well, and also used by a number of students for their research dissertations. And very importantly, it has been used to plug biodiversity data gaps in the decision-making space. For example, when EIS pertaining to development projects in the intertidal missed a lot of these species, and the absence of any baseline data for the city's intertidal marine biodiversity, our data was used to plug that data gap quite successfully. As members of MLOM moved to different locations in India, they came up with a variety of projects in those respective areas, as you can see here. We then started Intertidal Biodiversity of India, an umbrella project of sorts, where we collate all of this data. As of today, the project has 5,845 observations of 812 taxa. So what's next? The MLOM model has been growing slowly but steadily. We want to continue to refine it over time and are now looking at ways to improve the quality of the data. We hope to extend the geographic range of the MLOM effort to beyond just Mumbai. We also hope to use this data to answer finer ecological questions pertaining to intertidal ecology. And lastly, we aim to do our bit to take tide pooling, which is what this activity is popularly called, towards the ranks of activities such as birding and herping in India. It will take time. It's a slow process, but we hope to get there soon. Thank you for your time. We can take questions now.
So thank you very much. That was a fantastic talk. So we have Shaunak is also also here. You're both here. Oh, good. Yeah. I'm so glad of that. I'm super pumped. Thank you so much for presenting that. It's a little known fact that my postdoc was in marine biology, so I have a great love for it. I still work on it today with a fantastic postdoc, Anshika, who's part of this conference. And I'm actually going to take my privilege again of being a moderator and ask you, one of the most difficult things in working in the marine world, and I'm saying this from somebody who worked in the US where we actually have quite a bit of knowledge, is identifying species. It is really difficult because the number of experts in the world is very small, especially for several invertebrate groups, and that's what I work on. So how do you do this? How do you go about identifying these species when there's actually, it's quite tricky, I think.
It is. So for most of the species, we rely on a lot of users on iNaturalist. As Abhishek mentioned earlier, one of the reasons why we chose iNaturalist was because there's such little information available. And a lot of these species have not been recorded from the country. So we do check the local literature, we check the local records. If there is something recorded, then we base our IDs on that. There are also a bunch of websites that we refer to. There are some really great blogs that are from Southeast Asia, which have some really amazing information. So that is one area. But we also largely rely on the users on iNaturalist to help us out with our IDs.
Yeah.
Just to add to that, in addition to the issues that Shaunak mentioned about identification, there's also this whole issue where we think we have a lot of identification in local literature in India, but it's not accepted by global taxonomists because a lot of that Indian literature is really old literature that was based on taxonomy done in a different part of the world. And then just brought into the Indian literature because they look visually similar. So, for example, marine worms that we put up on iNat, it turns out that probably all marine worm taxonomy in India needs to be revised. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's very difficult. And actually now many species require molecular tools. I know Anshika works on sponges. They're very hard to identify without molecular input. So I will move on. I could talk with you all day. So let me take some questions here. So one really good question is, how do you explain the role of intertidal ecosystems and benefits in our environment, to particularly for people who are not near the coast? And this is something that I brought up with Naveen yesterday. And is there any particular reference that a person can have to know more about intertidal species? Is there anything you would recommend?
So to answer that question, our audience base has largely, at least when we started out, it was largely based in Mumbai. So it was very little participation from non-coastal areas. I think our audience in non-coastal areas started growing with our social media, where we put out species posts and sometimes posts about the habitat and so on and so forth. About the aspects about the importance of that habitat, we actually didn't go in with the approach of telling people that it's important. We just started showing people what exists there and sort of creating a fascination around it, just plain fascination. And that then sort of makes people go home and read up on, why is this important? We just started putting the spark with the fascination. That was the approach we took.
That's the best thing to do, is to get people excited about it. So Anup has a nice comment that he's been following your work for the past 3 years, and it's wonderful, and wants to know which other cities or landscapes do you see this expanding into, or maybe you expanding into?
So like Shaunak mentioned in one of his slides towards the conclusion, we've had team members move out to different parts of India, not necessarily close to Mumbai, and they started their own projects there. I was briefly working with WWF in Goa, and I started a local project there. And that has then grown, and the community is taking that forward, although I'm not there anymore. And as for our part in Mumbai, we are thinking of slowly expanding to just beyond the boundaries of Mumbai, to more places along the coast of Maharashtra. And importantly, handing this over to people who are based there, rather than us controlling the whole all of the area. Yeah.
So what we've been wanting to do is not actually go to different parts of the countries, but get the communities from those cities, those towns, to form their own collective, maybe in whatever capacity they can, and start documenting their shores. In fact, we'd be more than happy to help them in any way we can. Like, we've learned a few things over the last 3 years, and we'd be happy to share whatever we found. But yeah, they can get in touch with us for that.
So please share this information, because I do think this would be really important for people to contact you and get tips from you, since you've done such a great job. There's actually a lot more questions, but we are out of time, so I hope you can answer them on Slack. There's also a lot of comments and compliments for you as well. So thank you so much. It's fantastic work.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.